Hey guys, it's Bro You Whack, and yesterday was the last official day of the Overwatch League existing because in its place is going to be a new form of Overwatch eSports called the Overwatch Champions Series. Now I know after just making that 13-second announcement that there's going to be a lot of emotions from people. Some people are going to be sad, some are going to be angry, some are going to be wondering, wait, what is the Overwatch Champions Series? And hopefully this video will answer some of your guys' questions, but also possibly comfort you in case you're an Overwatch League fan. Well, before I talk about the Overwatch League, let's talk about how the Overwatch Champions Series works, because this is going to be the new esports branch of Overwatch that's going to be open to everybody. Yes, that includes you. Unlike the Overwatch League that was only open to the best players, but more importantly, rich billionaire owners, you yourself can start a team in the Overwatch Champions Series and possibly compete to the very top. This esport is going to be worldwide, but it's going to be divided into 3 regions: the North American region, the EU region, and then the Asian continental region. And the region that the majority of the players on a team or residents of are going to compete in that specific region. And while the Overwatch Champions Series is going to be open to all teams, there's going to be qualifiers to actually compete in the tournaments that are going to be held. So how the Champions Series works, like I mentioned before, is going to be divided into 3 sections: the NA section, the European section, and the Asian section. And in each section of the Champions Series, they're going to have their own form of tournaments. These tournaments are going to have qualifiers for all the teams from that specific region to compete in that will then lead into a main event stage for just that specific region. That's going to happen 2 times before the first Championship Series major takes place. That will be an international tournament that will have teams from both NA, EU, and the Asian continental region. Then after that first major takes place, there's going to be a couple month gap before we have another set of qualifiers, another set of main event stages, and then finally will be the finals tournament for the Champions Series. So to quickly give you an example to hopefully summarize how the Champions Series works, basically let's look at the NA region. In the first stage qualifier tournament, hundreds of teams are going to be competing, from Joe Smo teams like Bro You Wack's team all the way to the professional organizations like Optic and FaZe and Cloud9 and teams like that. Then the top teams from the qualifier tournament are going to move on to the main event stage, and more than likely they're going to be the professional organizations like Cloud9, Team Liquid, FaZe Clan, Optic Gaming, but possibly little old Bro You Wack's professional esports team can also make it to the main event. Then you're going to rinse and repeat to the next month with another qualifier bracket, then another main event stage. Then finally, the top teams from the main stage events are going to then go on to the major tournament. But more importantly, the other teams from the other regions are going to play against each other. And if you've ever paid attention to League of Legends esports, it's kind of similar to how that's structured, where teams fight in their own region, but then they all come together in a real part of the world to play in an online tournament held like in real life. And guess what? Because that's also what's going to be happening for these international tournaments. For the major and finals, they're going to be holding live events, where the major tournament is going to be held in Dallas, Texas in the United States, but the finals tournament taking place at the very end of the year is going to be taking place in Stockholm, Sweden. And I'm so hyped for that because I think this is the first tournament being held in Europe for Overwatch. But now that I explained how the Champions Series is structured and how tournaments work, you're probably wondering, okay, but how do teams work? Like you mentioned regions, but is the San Francisco Shock going to be playing? Is the Toronto Defiant going to be playing? What happened to the London Spitfire? You see, how teams worked in the Overwatch League was that either billionaire owners owned a league team, think of Robert Kraft from the New England Patriots owning the Boston Uprising, or an esports-oriented team, think of NRG owning the San Francisco Shock. And teams were able to compete in the league for however long that they wanted. They just had to meet a certain amount of parameters, which included player salary, team facility, and stuff like that. But now that's no longer going to be the case in the Champions Series, because the Champions Series is going to be open to anybody that wants to compete, which can include a team from little old Bro You Wack, but also a team from an actual organization like Cloud9, NRG, Optic Gaming, you know, the big esports orgs. So to answer your question, what's going to happen to the Overwatch League teams that we grew up with and loved for 6+ years? Well, some esports organizations like NRG might still keep their San Francisco Shock branding, or they could just rebrand their team to NRG because NRG is a much bigger name. Some teams like the old team that I was on, the Florida Mayhem, might not ever compete ever again, even under their parent organization Misfits Gaming, because Misfits Gaming gaming is going down the route of content creation. And then there's going to be some professional organizations like Team Liquid that have never had an Overwatch League team, but might be interested in scrounging together a team to compete in the Champions Series. And while most of the events and the majors and the tournaments are going to have professional esports teams because those are the people with the most amount of resources and sponsorships and brand identity, there are going to be opportunities for people like you and I to not only compete onto teams, but to possibly have teams of our own to compete in the Champions Series, because it is open to all players. But skin collectors and people that like the color aspect of the Overwatch League are probably going to be wondering, well, what's going to happen to the team uniform skins in game? Are they still going to sell them, or are new teams going to be able to sell skins? If I'm going to be realistic here, I don't know if they've said anything about the skins, but they're not only probably going to shut down the Overwatch League shop and stop selling the Overwatch League team skins, but teams in the Champions Series probably won't get their own skins for you to have in game, because, well, that would take too long to make, to have a team and their colors and the logo made for all 30 plus heroes, 40 plus heroes in the future. That's probably not going to happen. They might still have drops for like sprays and whatnot, but as terms of skins, I think that's probably going to be done. And I think how tournaments are going to be held as terms of uniforms is that, well, one team's probably going to have the orange base skins and the other team is just going to have the white base skins. Now, you're probably going to be wondering, why are they doing this? Why don't they just keep the Overwatch League format? And there's two reasons why. The first is because the Overwatch League cost a lot of organizations a lot of money, and they weren't making a lot of money. The original format was structured very similar to the NFL, MLB, and NBA, where rich billionaire owners not only made money from ticket sales and merchandise, but then eventually selling their share of the team, or selling the team outright. And once teams realized that they weren't making NFL and NBA and MLB money, then they decided they didn't want to be in this league anymore. So then came the Champions Series, which solved another issue that a lot of people kind of forget about, which is regional pride. Now with the Champions Series, while you can have players from South Korea living in North America and competing on North American teams, you are probably also going to have more North American players competing on North American teams and have more regional pride for that team, rather than just having regional city pride, which eventually got to the point where people weren't rooting for a team because of the city, but rather just the colors. Not only that, but there's also going to be other issues that are solved if you really care about like tournament organizations. Like Faceit is going to be partnering with the Champions Series, which is an organizer that works with CSGO. And there's also going to just be more opportunities for not only outside tournaments of the Champions Series, but like I keep mentioning throughout this video, opportunities for anybody to compete to be an esports player for Overwatch, which was very surprising and very limiting in the Overwatch League world, but no longer with the Champions Series. But now comes the question, will this Champions Series for Overwatch esports be better than the Overwatch League? And if you're a fan of traditional sports and not so much traditional esports, then you're probably like the format of the Overwatch League, because not only was it simple to understand, but it was also familiar. Unlike this new Champions Series where we don't know how it's going to work, and you don't know what teams are going to be competing or what players are going to be on what team. But what I do like about it most is that it is more open. While the Overwatch League liked to say that it was open to opportunities, it was very, very closed off. The most closed off esport of all time. But with the Champions Series, while we will see repeating organizations come up time and time again, because like I mentioned before, they have resources, now it's actually more open to teams because, well, the best teams will get to the top. They just will. So whether that's coming from a professional org or a team of buddies that just met 2 months ago, the best team will win. And that can only mean good things for Overwatch esports, because that's how esports has worked for League of Legends and CSGO. And while some people can argue what they want about esports for those games, I mean, there's a reason why they're still popping years later. But let me know what you think about this new age of esports for Overwatch. Are you excited? Are you sad about the Overwatch League? Or are you both? Just let me know. But until then, I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. More Overwatch 2 videos to come, and bye.